Hello, digital warriors, and welcome back to the Forge of Unicorn podcast. And today we have a special guest, Andy Will. Andy is the founder and managing partner at Willpower Venture Capital, and this firm is something really unique, something that for our research in the Forge of Unicorns means a lot because Andy is working with a portfolio that is fully B2B and software driven, especially in fintech, future of work, and healthcare. So, welcome back, audience, and welcome here, Andy.
Thank you so much, Michele. I'm so honored to be on your podcast this morning and looking forward to a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, and trust us, the honor is from our side because when we have people intriguing like you, we are amazed to have discussion with persons that they can confirm and especially challenge what we have found in their research. And why I say confirm and challenging, because I was looking at your portfolio, man, and I was really impressed of some of the firms that you have there, especially Isuzu. When I went to look at their technical stack and at the job description that they are looking for, I was with a jaw-dropping moment because I saw finally somebody that is looking for developers that are doing test-driven programming, doing test-driven programming right.
It's funny how rare that is these days.
In these days, especially the Gen AI is replacing developers, yes. So you found something, and this is some kind of discussion that I want really to go deeper in. But also I saw that you have Pay Theory, Stratify, Adept AI, all companies that they are looking to create software with good quality. That is not that common. So, before starting, can you give us, please, a brief intro about you?
It's a fantastic question. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Yes, Andy Will. I'm the founder and managing partner of Willpower Venture Capital based here in the Washington, D.C. area. Had a bit of an atypical entry into the venture capital market, candidly, I think, versus a lot of my peers. And we try and use that experience and life experience to our advantage and with the way we operationalize the firm, as with everyone who has to kind of play to their strengths. So I went to undergrad at University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, here in the United States. Went to New York City after I graduated, started my career in more traditional financial services at JP Morgan, doing investment banking and sales and trading, traded equity derivatives there in their software book for about 4.5 years. Went over to the hedge fund side of things, and I was a portfolio manager there for about 1.5 years in some public software investments, doing a bit of private side of things as well, and doing some early stage investing on my own. I then went to the University of Chicago for business school, where I got my MBA and worked at a venture fund in Chicago called Listen Ventures. And then came back to the Washington, D.C. area where I'm originally from. My father was in the Army, so we moved around quite a bit. We ended up in the D.C. area when the war in Afghanistan kicked off because he was a facial reconstructive surgeon here in the U.S. And came back to help build a venture capital firm here called Zeal Capital Partners, which we scaled that platform across three funds. And to your point, I think we were fortunate to have some successful investments in that portfolio, and definitely excited to talk about some of those unique characteristics of what we look for and support founders that we find very interesting. But I broke off to start Willpower about 7 months ago in July of this past year, with, to your point, a focus on vertical market software that is both AI native and AI enabled, with a very human-centric approach to leverage the productivity and efficiency gains of AI without losing sight of the dynamic thoughtfulness of the human interaction that can help operationalize those systems at a high degree.
I love the focus that you put in the human centricity, because indeed is one of the aspects that we understood in the research is the most critical one. What I mean is, in the 14 years of research that we are discussing here and all the data that we have collected, we identified that there are recurring patterns that I like to call it dysfunctionalities. And one is the focus on financial aspects, but not on the human aspect. And to me, it looks like a matryoshka that is inside empty. Financial aspect could be really intriguing, but if inside you don't have the people with the right passion that they are working for your financial institute, I guess is a ship that is sinking like the Titanic.
Yes, and Michele, I couldn't agree more with you. And even so, I think especially as an early stage investor, and it's one of the reasons that I felt really passionately about going to the early stage of software development as an investor, was that you have some interesting financial metrics to grab onto and understand markets and how they're operationalizing the firm. But even if you have really strong financial metrics, if you don't have the human element of really dynamic human beings who care passionately about the problem they're solving and are building teams the right way to operationalize the firm, it really actually creates a false signal of productivity and of efficiency within the organization, with inevitable competition and the price to start a company going down by the month, it seems. That is ultimately going to be competed away if you don't have the right team infrastructure and the humans there doing the work that needs to be done, with leveraging a lot of the productivity gains of artificial intelligence, which I think is a necessity going forward to find a high probability of success.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe, and I strongly believe, especially after my experience in F1 and MotoGP, that the key power of a successful company, I don't want to talk about startup, because we know that in a startup there is passion by definition. Mm-hmm. But in a company, if you don't have the people that are working in that they have the right passion, you cannot ask them for the extra mile.
And it's so funny you brought up Isuzu at the front of the call, which of course it has been a very productive financial investment, and it is a big return driver for my track record. However, the human element is what everything that it started with. I mean, even at a senior leadership level, what is so atypical about Isuzu, which many would probably argue is not a great thing, is they have co-CEOs still. They're an over $1 billion valuation company with 200 employees and doing amazing things in the market, but they're still a equal co-CEO environment that they actually named the company Isuzu because it's an African proverb that means if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so they've ingrained that methodology and that ethos in the organization from the very ground up that has really benefited them as they've reached product market fit and continued to scale the organization. So I just really wanted to double down on kind of those comments you made and how important I believe it is to find success in the long run.
I love that you are bringing this human centricity aspect, because it's indeed one of the key problems that we have observed in our research. It's probably related to some root cause that start from a field, IT, that doesn't have any standard. Mm-hmm. But if we go on the other spectrum that is more related to what we were discussing now, is that a lot of companies, they are stuck worldwide with employees that are fully disengaged. And we start to observe this since long time ago. And so in the latest years, we have started and search which kind of data can we gather, not only from our point of view, but worldwide, to understand if it's true that we have employees that are disengaged or also burnout. So we found two research that are really intriguing. The first is from Gallup, and that is telling us that the steady ramp up of disengagement is continuing in these years. And last year was an astonishing 77% of employees worldwide and disengaged. Mm-hmm. That is a number for me that is unbelievable. It means that 2 people over 3, they are completely disengaged. They are producing almost nothing. And this disengagement is exactly the opposite of the passion we were discussing. Mm-hmm. And with my partners, we were discussing, okay, is only disengagement or is there even more? Because doing coaching one-on-one session with people in our team, we have also a behavioral psychologist and social engineer. It's clear that these people, they have issues that they go beyond disengagement. And so we understood that there is also the concept of burnout. And the report is telling us that 38% of people, they are on burnout or they have experienced burnout. And for us, looking at the data, but this is something that is still a research that is ongoing, these people, they can go even in depression if burnout is not addressed properly. Mm-hmm. So from disengagement to depression, the spectrum of amount of work that or productivity or joy that an employee can bring in a company is like 1 to 0. And this is a drama for me that is creating not only financial loss, but also it's a social issue.
Yeah, no, it was a great, it was a wonderful research report, and thank you so much for sending that over, because it was a lot of data that I think I had an inkling about just from kind of passing and dealing with a lot of these companies on a daily basis and understanding, kind of just anecdotally observing some of these dynamics. But to see the hard data, and I think one of the things that really jumped out at me about that report was, I think it was like 9.9% of global GDP is wasted on burnout and missing opportunities from an economic viability standpoint, which is astounding. I mean, multiple trillions of dollars. And it's, I got to say, not as surprising to me, especially in the age of AI, as the human element becomes a little. I think during the hype cycle in the initial last couple of years, we've had this promise that AI is going to solve all our woes. We can implement it within the organization with ease and speed, and it's going to replace a lot of the human dynamic that has led to some of these burnout characteristics in the past. But I think it's only accelerated things, candidly, because as you have or remote first teams, which I know has a higher degree of less engagement and more loneliness and leading to more depression. The more remote you are, you're not interconnected with human beings. You add in agentic workflows where maybe some of your coworkers are actually AI agents and they're not actual human beings. So you lose some of that interpersonal connection, et cetera. And so to me, it really comes down to the manager, right? The manager layer, and having that North Star vision, being able to understand what's important to your team, to your subordinates, and being able to incentivize their care about the mission and the North Star orientation of the organization. And that's candidly why we like to invest in mission-oriented businesses, because it always has that intrinsic value to the employees that they attract, tend to have not only the skill required to do the job, but they care about the outcome of the organization in the long run. And when you marry the two together, that's when I've found you can alleviate some of these burnout and some of these loneliness and disenfranchisement that we've seen kind of happen over the last few years.
Now it starts to be clear, the recipe. Because indeed, one aspect that we understood pretty clear is that when you have a company that has a lot of employees in burnout or disengagement, it means that it's a systematic problem. And in Japanese, there is a proverb that says that when the tree is sick because it's the root sick. Mm-hmm. The root in a company is, of course, for me, the leadership. But I see the leadership from the holistic, so from the investor to the C executive and the managers or the leaders of a team. All these layers, they need to be screened and helped with different tools. And indeed, a startup, they have a mission and an amount of people that is easy to align them. But big corporations, instead, they have tough time to do that. Mm-hmm. And what we observe is that typically the larger the organization, the more prone they are to do digital transformation, because they believe that embracing technology will help them to go beyond the digital disruption that is perpetual. And I love the book about the anticipatory organization, and the concept is clear. Or you are the digital disruption, or you chase the digital disruption. And if you chase, this company, typically, they do digital transformation. And with typical, I mean, last year, the report said that 91% of companies, they are doing digital transformation. Means almost everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Part of it's branding and messaging. Part of it's a necessity to continue to compete in the market. But again, I think it comes back to your point. It's the integration of the digital transformation with the human element. Because if you don't have that inextricable link between the two, you're going to miss the beauty and the art and the magic of digital transformation and all the power that it ingrains in an organization. If you don't have the human element, it's going to be you're not going to be able to maximize the outcome of that endeavor. And so I really thought the research that you provided and your thought leadership on this space was really impactful, because it's something that I've seen anecdotally, but you really provide a lot of the data to support some of the senses that we had in the market as well.
Thank you for that. And I have to tell you that the data were also double check with other expert leaders, especially on this part of the digital transformation, because I see a clear picture. That is, we have a lot of people disengaged, a lot of companies, they are trying to do digital transformation. But in the last 25 years, I went through so many digital transformation saving the day for a lot of companies, that I start to ask myself, okay, why they are also asking, not also, let's say only asking me, hey Mike, come here and save the day. Why nobody is asking me, hey Mike, come here and we show you how others they've saved the day?
Yep.
So I
Yep.
so I start to ask my friends, hey guys, can we find other reports that there are other companies that are doing this research how we are doing? And we found an interesting report from Boston Consulting, Deloitte, and McKinsey about how many digital transformation are really, let's say, profitable. If we look at the holistic picture,
Sure.
so if I invest 1 million, am I able to tell you that my investment now is providing me some return of investment, or is a total failure, or somehow is like before? And it's intriguing to see that only 7% roughly of digital transformation, they are bringing value upfront of an investment that is ginormous, because last year only were invested worldwide $2.5 trillion in digital transformation. And now with the Gen AI new mission or new hype, because for somebody it's a mission because it's their business model, for others it's an hype that they want to chase, it seems that the forecast of the digital transformation cost worldwide in the next 2 years will spike even to 5 trillions.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible amount, and I think when a lot of organizations when they get into trouble here and when they're initiating, and you would know this far better than I do, candidly, Michaela, having so much experience in engaging with these organizations on their digital transformation efforts. I'm more funding companies that hopefully will adopt, more incumbencies will adopt their technological solutions and help with that digital transformation. But we're not really engaging with those larger scale organizations and facilitating that, right? But what I've realized is I think a lot of companies that tend to not realize the return on investment from a digital transformation project is because they don't really have the North Star metric of what does great look like, and what is the kind of, what are they looking for a return on investment? It has to be grounded in productivity or capital efficiency gains. So you have to understand, what is the metric you're tracking for that, right? Is it revenue per employee? Is it expansion of margin profile? Is it, for an early stage company, their burn ratio going down significantly? Like, how do you quantify the success of the endeavor? And then you layer in, how are we actually operationalizing that, which I think you do a wonderful job of kind of setting up a system of how you go through that process to really squeeze every ounce of performance out of that endeavor. Because to your point, it's a very important thing in today's market. And there is a lot of heritage industries that candidly are still not digitally native or digitally forward, that are going to have to go through this process in the near future. And I think you're sharing some wonderful lesson learns on how to operationalize that process in the most efficacious way.
Your point that they have to go through, I guess, is even more than yes, is a yes in capital, with underlying that below there is a must at square. Because if we look at the 2 decades in the past, how many companies there were swept out from the Fortune 500? Being bricks and mortar is not the business that you can keep in the next decade properly. All the old companies that they were with the mindset or with the roots in bricks and mortar, if they don't become digital, they will not exist anymore. They will be another spectrum in the closest, like it was Blockbuster.
Yeah, or a Netflix who went through a digital transformation and successfully, and now is
Yep.
owning that market, right? And that's a pure play example. There's many nuances in between it,
Yes,
but it's
yes.
a great
But
call
as
out.
you see, we have some great example like Netflix, like Airbnb, or Uber, the two main provider of taxi and flat. They don't know a taxi and a flat. So this kind of digital transformation and modernization of their business model is really something remarkable, that indeed is in stark contrast with the companies that are out there, the mediocre, that are not able to grow and that they will remove from the floor. Because what I observe doing this job in the last 2 decades roughly is that there is this idea that you call a consultant, the consultant arrive with the blueprint, and they will do the magic. But your company is unique. Your North Star is not my North Star. And if you have people disengaged, how you can ask them to transform if they can barely arrive to the job. And a lot of company, returning to what you were discussing about the metrics, they are looking in the board, especially more vanity metrics than functional metrics. And there is an intriguing point that I was able to lay out with my team. IT is a strange sector where de facto we don't have any standard to showcase that this software is good software. When I told you that Isuzu is a fantastic company because has some if I have to tell you what I think as a behavioral engineer, if I look at the job description, you have asked people to showcase some behavior in the way they collaborate and work, so socio-technical behavior, that are socio-technical behavior of a unicorn developer. So they need to collaborate, they need to be crafters doing test-driven development, and all the practices around DevOps and cloud-native architecture. Good. With this, we know that you have set the bar to a certain level, asking for social technical practices that are your way of measuring it. But your way is not what the market is doing, because there is not a universal stamp like a German TUV that is telling Andy Will way of measuring software is recognized as the meter. No, the market indeed doesn't have any standard. How did you craft this standard in your companies?
I would say one thing I want to be super clear on is that I'm not the star of the show for my companies, right? Like, they're in charge here. The founders are the leaders of the organization. It's their dream, it's their vision, it's their effort that makes them so successful, and we're a small part of that journey. We want to be supportive to them. We want to add our skill sets to the table and help move them 5 to 10% in the right direction if we can. But I would never characterize it as it's my plan, right? Never come up with the plan itself or implement it. We do a lot of vetting in the diligence stage to understand what is the mentality and the methodology that these founders are employing to hire their engineering org, to hire their sales and marketing org. What is the ethos and the company values? What is the culture that they're looking to build? What is the skill set and the archetype of individual that would be fit well within that culture, right? And so, to your point, there's just not a lot of standards within the IT realm in terms of what great software looks like. But what I know from, I was fortunate to play Division I athletics at Notre Dame, played lacrosse, and understanding the standard's the standard, right? We have a certain standard on our team in terms of effort, in terms of time commitment, in terms of the way we do business, in terms of the way we carry ourselves in post-game interviews, et cetera, where A players want to play with A players, and B players don't like A players, and A players don't like B players. And so I think there's just so many examples of that where if you have, it's the same as like special operations in the U.S. military and many militaries around the world. I just happen to know the U.S. a little bit better. Is they have a rigorous vetting standard of how you get to the certain echelon that you're at, and that's how they weed out the right, not just physical and skill sets, but the mentality and the ethos of the individual that will thrive in that unpredictable and high velocity and challenging environment. And so, I'm a big student of history, and I try and pay attention to other areas outside of software of where there is a good standardization. They hold a standard at a high level, and how do you kind of tailor that to the startup culture and identify those aspects at the early stage that are going to find success throughout the organization, because they're inevitably going to go through up and downturns. Business cycles are going to turn. They're going to have to adapt to a changing environment. The only unifying theme is, what is that standard you've set? Who are the people around the table who are holding that standard? And how are you attracting the talent necessary to find success in the market? And so I think it's such a wonderful point to make, and something that candidly I don't think gets talked about enough, because this is a human first endeavor always. and I try and never lose sight of that.
I have some data about how much the market is talking about it, because what you are looking in Isuzu, for instance, and you say you are not a part, but I believe that you are a part, because all these companies that you have in the portfolio, they are looking for good quality. So it means that you have to spread the evangelization about good software first. So I believe that strongly. The point is, what is doing the market? And in the last 14 years, we have assessed so many developers for organization to let them understand, hey guys, you are onboarding player B or even player C. I don't want to discredit anybody, but in a market where you go on a training platform that for $20, they provide you a certification that you are a TypeScript developer, or now nowadays that AI is so on the hype, but you are a Python developer. But your real job is a tram driver or a guy that is working in a fast food.
Yeah.
And then you have a stamp with a certification and you are a developer. Until 2 years ago, these guys, they were able to join the market as IT force. So to help the customer that we have, the company that they are asking us for help in assessing their labor force, we have high standards that are the replica of what I witnessed in F1 and MotoGP, trying to replicate the engineering mastery on this kind of environment in IT. And we have run it with thousands and thousands of developers. And unfortunately, the market is so sick that only 3% of the candidates, they were able to pass the bare minimum to be a junior IT engineer in this kind of unicorns environment. But because working in IT is not a one-man band, you are not a driver of your motorcycle and there is nobody around you. You have to work in a team. We start to design some sociometric markers to understand in a context of high collaborative environment, how your technical mastery fits also your social mastery to integrate and collaborate with the others. And since we started to have these two combination of social and technical metrics, the number from 3% dropped to 0.9. So only 0.9% of the candidates, they're able to pass or bare minimum. For this is something that I'm really in love to see that your companies, they're looking for this 0.9%.
I think you hit the nail on the head. That one, it's hard to do, and two, I think there's kind of a bifurcation here in terms of the challenges. One is at the earlier stage of company development, right? You have a lean and mighty team that is using all the power of a startup to their advantage. They want to be nimble, they want to move fast, they want to adapt to product feedback, they want to continue to use all the powers of a startup to their advantage versus incumbency, right? And in that time, that kind of initial hires is so crucially important, in my opinion, where you have to take the extra time to find that 0.09%. I would argue the 0.045%, probably the upper echelon of that 0.09%, right? Because they're the ones who are going to hold the culture. They're the ones who are going to set the standard. Those are the ones who are going to hire the next group of team members that are going to help kind of proliferate the mission of the organization. And so I think at the initial stage, you have to be just really diligent, hyper sensitive about having high caliber talent that both have that social element as well as the technical knowledge. But then as you scale the organization, and now things might be changing in the age of AI, I certainly think you're going to need to hire far fewer people to operationalize a firm as you grow and scale. And there's plenty of data points on kind of modern companies that have been able to do that over the last couple of years. But even you still need to hire quickly because you're growing quickly, and you might make some hiring mistakes on that side of things because speed might actually be more important initially, at least, than being really slow in how you make those hiring decisions. But you have to readjust quickly, right? Is you have to understand, do they fit? Do they not fit? What are the bogeys? What are the trial period? And then make a change quickly if that's not the right person in the organization. Because the worst thing you can do is hire someone who's not a great fit, doesn't have the technical knowledge, or doesn't have the social element to operationalize the technical knowledge in the environment that they're currently working in. Then it's a poison to the team because people get unhappy that they have to carry bigger workloads. People aren't carrying the share, et cetera. And it's just a cancer within an organization. So it's not an easy thing to solve. There's kind of different stages of growth and different methodologies. But to your point, I think you have to have that North Star and hold really diligently to it in order to have that long-term success as an organization, or else inevitably you end up seeing a lot of these companies that reach a lot of scale earlier in their process have not figured out the right kind of structured standards and team dynamics that can help them over time. And they tend to peter out, and hopefully they're able to scrape out a good return for themselves and their investors, but they're certainly not going to be able to reach their full potential, no matter how great the product is that they're selling.
Highlighting of the North Star, and it's not the first time, is remarkable because you touch 2 points here that are, for me, really connected. the toxicity of people that are not in the 0.9% that they come in your company if you don't have a filter, and they start to intoxicate the company. Because what we have noticed is if you have the larger majority of people that they start to become not A player but B or C, then the compound behavior, the culture of your organization start to be the compound behavior of these C players. So they start to be a company that moves toward the mediocrity, and so the company will stagnate scaling. And this cancer that people they start to onboard in the company without being aware is a cancer that with the North Star, with a framework like OKRs, with a technical excellence program, can really put the light on the stage since the day zero. And if you are a mediocre, or either you grow or either you leave. And what we observe when we apply the software craftsmanship dojo in the companies, or the companies they apply the open source version of the software craftsmanship dojo, what they are reporting is that these cancers that they weren't aware that they had in the company is emerging naturally, because these profiles typically they are not willing to move into the journey of becoming an engineer. And so typically with the right North Star and the OKR, with the technical excellence program, they leave the company because they understand that they are not anymore in the kind of environment where they can hide and thrive.
It's a great point, and actually failed to bring it up earlier, and I was kind of waiting for the right time to bring it up. But I'm actually an investor from my time at Zeal in a company called Year One as well out of Portland, Oregon. Stephen Ajayi and Sam Ajayi, two brothers, are the founders of that business. But what they do is they help enterprise engineering teams understand the data and the utilization of their engineering org and how they're marrying kind of their North Star metrics with how it's operationalizing on a daily basis, and how do they squeeze the most productivity out of the engineering teams that they have at the current moment. And with a huge emphasis on how do you work with those companies on figuring out their North Star metrics, what does great look like, what is their standard for their engineering org, and how do you kind of draw the data from the day-to-day life of their software engineers to understand and quantify how they're actually operating against that kind of North Star metric. And they've seen a pretty significant uptick in growth recently. I'll be kind of cagey in terms of not divulging too much information about the business or kind of where they are today. But they touch on a lot of the elements that you're talking about. And I'm happy to connect you with the founder after the call to talk more about digital transformation, because I think it would be a really robust conversation and maybe even a podcast.
Yes, I would love to have him as a podcast. Also, I would love to give them the researcher with the software craftsmanship dojo in open source, because I believe that the software every day is more important than what it was in the past, to a point that now we don't have nothing without software. If we look around,
not only nothing.
If we look around, nothing that we have in our room now is without software. I look around, and the only stuff that probably I have here that is without software are the books on my bookshelf here and the books that I have in the living room. But all the rest is software driven.
Absolutely. I can't raise my fund without software. I can't apply for a loan without software. I can't, go to even the local public library without my digital library card, right? And so, to your point, the software is ingrained throughout our entire society, and it's only accelerating because of the AI. And I know we're going to maybe talk a little bit about the quality of code with some of these co-pilots and things like that have its own challenges. And I know I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse here, but I do believe that all the topics that we're talking about is only accelerating going forward. You might think with a lot of this AI innovation that it actually becomes less important because you can be more productive in all these things, but I think it's quite the opposite, right? You're going to have a smaller team. You're going to have to pay attention to more A+ talent. You're going to have North Star metrics and culture and systems in place that what great looks like, because the marginal hire is so much more important today than it was even just a few years ago. And so I really love that you brought that up.
And also is emerging an intriguing point with behavioral engineering, that engineering culture of a unicorn start to be a recipe that can be predictable. Because with behavioral engineering, now that we know which are the ingredients to build a unicorn, putting these ingredients in the right soil at the right timeline it means that you know which will be the future unicorn that you are growing. And this is something intriguing, and I will link below in the description also an article that I just released this week that is indeed related to how to engineer with behavioral engineering unicorns based on the proper markers. That is indeed again related to OKRs and behavioral engineering applied to technical excellence. So you are confirming this, and this is fantastic. The point is, Andy, that who is not confirming this, because probably they even don't know, and they follow the herd like sheep lost here and there, is that they are applying what I call the cookie cutter. Or they ask a consultant, hey buddy, can you bring here your beautiful blueprint? They drop the blueprint on the table, as expenses and voice, they leave the room, and the company is left with a fantastic blueprint that is asking disengaged people to, hey, you have to do DevOps, you have to do Agile, you have to do Safe, you have to do now AI. And looking at the science report, it seems that the new digital disruption that is around the corner knocking at the door is quantum. So and we are close, very close. So all these blueprints seems to me a recipe more to add more chaos, more fuel on the fire.
And more advantage for those who take advantage of everything you're talking about, that work within your system, that understand that's because there's so few doing it, right? And so I think there's a double-edged sword to all of these conversations. Harder, more chaotic, more challenging to get across. But if you can get it right, you're going to be one of the few that are going to have such a significant advantage as you scale an organization. And that's why I love that you're really doubling down on this point, on getting it right from kind of initiation and how you kind of build it over time.
Yes, and indeed, what I always say, and there are people that are telling this louder than me since long before me. For instance, Agile was the Agile Manifesto of software development and was with a small a because it was an adjective. Now it's Agile with a capital A because you cannot sell beautifulness, but you can sell therapy to become beauty. And Agile is the same. You cannot say agility, but you can say a framework that is providing you the ability to become agile if you are able to implement it correctly. Then it's up to you. The same for DevOps. If you don't sell DevOps culture, you sell DevOps tools. AI is the same. So it is intriguing how indeed the market is moving people to believe that with money they can purchase what they are not able to do with behaviors.
And I feel like we learned this lesson in many decades, right? And from the astronomical amount of consulting fees that enterprise customers in the U.S. pay on an annual basis, and they get this beautiful report on everything that is going right and wrong in their organization or for a specific project they're working on. And in my experience, 90% of those never come to fruition because, to your point, it's a report. It tells you what's wrong. It doesn't tell you how to fix it, really, because you have to have this framework and the standardization to like then implement what you see in that. And so then you kind of take it a step further. So I'm pretty big, and I think you see it from a lot of consultancies that are laying off a ton of employees. They're seeing less business because companies are getting smarter to this dynamic, and they're understanding that the blueprint's not enough. You have to actually get your hands dirty within the organization and figure out how are you going to go operationalize this strategy?
As I tell my students in my dojo doing judo and jiu-jitsu, I never saw a Bruce Lee looking at the movie of Bruce Lee. Or you train and you put the skin in the game, or you can turn around the pages of your manga believing that you are Bruce Lee. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I love that analogy. I might have to take it.
I guess the skin in the game is part that is something also that a lot of PVC they don't do, and instead you are doing that. For this reason, and I guess that you are the perfect candidate. Do you see in this transformation of the business to become IT and software driven something else outside the 6 anti-patterns that we have found with the research? With your experience, do you have even some extra observation that can help us to develop something new in the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the research that you provided was definitely very robust and provided a lot of anecdotes that candidly I hadn't been thinking about, and certainly thinking about a lot more. I would say one of the things that actually was interesting that I had been thinking a lot about previous, and then kind of reading your research and thinking about a little bit more robustly, is that I have a pretty strong preference for in-person teams in the companies that we support, because I think to build high-quality teams, to build a digitally native environment, to have that agile ability to build software and to build products and to distribute those products efficiently, I think you need that impromptu conversations and those collaboration and being shoulder to shoulder on a daily basis to build that team culture and standards, et cetera. However, I did realize in your report that from a burnout perspective, the hybrid work environment of 2 to 3 days in the office with 1 or 2 days outside the office tends to lead to the most fulfillment and the most sense of meaning at work, and decreases burnout, et cetera. And so that's an area that I'm certainly thinking about, because I still candidly feel very strongly about that in-person element is a big value driver, especially at the early stages of company development. And then secondarily, I think one of the reasons that historically or during the pandemic, it was such a boon to go more remote teams, and we've seen some of the fallout from a productivity and engagement standpoint, was one, because we couldn't be in the office from the pandemic, of course, but two, there was also just not a dispersion, at least in the US, of engineering talent. Like, you really had to go to the Bay Area, or you had to go to New York City, maybe Boston, maybe 1 or 2 other cities to find the team. And if you want an in-person culture, you have to be there. And so if you're going to be in a non-core city, you have to have a remote team to attract the right talent. But that's really changing, in my opinion, across the US, especially post-pandemic, is you see more and more high caliber individuals in various knowledge centers around the country, whether it's Washington, D.C. or Chicago or LA or your traditional markets, et cetera. We're seeing that kind of expansion of talent that to me lends itself to more the ability to build in non-core geos across the United States. And so we definitely see a lot of interesting deal flow from there. And so I'm not sure if I answered your question directly, but I would say that that's something that I'm still grappling with and trying to understand how we want to play in that market. But I still strongly believe that in-person element is such a big driver.
I would say yes. You provide me something more to research. Indeed, I have data about remote versus in-person versus hybrid. In my partnership, we are remote first, because I have coaches, software crafters from all the world. Yeah. And when you are probably in a niche environment, you need to adapt to the need to connect with player A's like you that are not your neighbors. So you need to go abroad and you need to go remote. Mm-hmm. For sure, there are tools. I guess that during the COVID, they weren't these kind of tools to create the experience of what I call today the virtual office. Now we have tools. In my company, we have the office that is a virtual office, and we meet there every day. We lunch together, we have coffee together, we work together, we stay at home in the comfort of our houses with our families. Mm-hmm. Nobody is reporting disengagement of burnout, even if we work like crazy, and we are socially connected all the time. So I guess it's an interesting point that we can indeed work together with some research, with some data, trying to do surveys and this kind of research-driven approach in your companies. Because for software development, remote is also some kind of emotional healing to the trauma of socialization, mm-hmm. where typically a developer, it is a kind of weird animal, because we are all introverts. And typically when you have to discuss with stakeholders, they are always pissed, because the software that we are creating for them is never what they want, because in the chain from desire to product, there is the game of the wireless phone. And that depends on how the company works, mm-hmm. To shorten it and improve the communication. So I guess we can indeed look, and I will take notes that this is another point that I need to add to my research.
No, but it's a great point you bring up, and I think what I'm talking about also is the law of averages. I think on average, the elements that I was speaking to tend to hold true, and there's exceptions to every rule, right? And then there's so many productive companies that were remote first that have built wonderful brands and enduring value in the market. And I think a lot of it comes down to also where you're located, right? Especially internationally, in a market that's not as big as the U.S., then you to secure the talent pool, right, that you would be necessary to operationalize that, it becomes a bit of a different dilemma. And so I'm not, and at Willpower, we only invest in the U.S. and a bit in Canada potentially, but pretty U.S. centric. And so we have a kind of our methodology built on the market that we operate in and the types of companies we're investing in. But it's a really good food for thought and something that I think about on a daily basis. And we're going to continue to iterate just like we want our companies to, is look at the data, understand how it's working operationally, adapt to a changing environment. And if we see signs that a hybrid type of environment or a remote first environment are actually more productive than in person going forward, we're not afraid to make that change. We just have some pretty strong data, at least anecdotally from our experience, that is what's working for our strategy today and something that we're operationalizing as a firm.
Data are the truth.
That's right. You can only change what you can measure, right? The old adage.
All the rest are emotional data.
Which can be important too. You got there's things there as well, but I agree with you. You need the empirical data to start.
Yeah. Probably being an engineer moves me more toward factual data instead of emotional data, but indeed, empathy plus data is what I'm looking for all the time. So very eager to do this deep dive with you in the future.
I can't wait. That sounds really fun.
Yes, it will be for sure. I am pretty sure. I see the time is slipping through my fingers, a sign that we were enjoying the discussion. So, last question. Do you have any suggestion, advice that you want to share with our audience? How they can get an investor like you to back up their ideas? How they can get in partnership with you?
Yes, it's a great question. And I would say we as an organization probably have two distinct elements to us that might differ from other venture capital firms that you'd be raising from at our stage. But I'd say the two elements that we really dive deeply into is the human first diligence process at initiation. So we want to get to know founders deeply personally, understand how they were brought up, what are the kind of key green light symbols that we identify to being high value founders who can adapt to a changing environment, who have a high standard, who understand how to attract talent, how to manage that talent, how to operationalize their vision into a product roadmap and a high level engineering org, and how do you kind of do all the elements that are so important to success at the early stages. And so we spend a heck of a lot of time, less on the financial metrics and more on the team dynamics, founder mentality and background at the diligence process to really validate those elements. And we have not just anecdotal, we're just trying to get a feel for it, but we have a framework that we've developed and we operationalize in terms of that in the human diligence process for the founders we look to support. And then two is we tend to want to look at more niche verticals where that has lacked digital innovation in the past that might be perceived as a smaller vertical, but growing at a high clip, and where there's an unlock for why the reason now is to solve the problem that they're solving. And we can really look at tangential markets that they can move into after the fact if for some reason that market was not quite big enough or it didn't grow at the scale that we thought it would. We find a better way to approach the investment standpoint is not to concentrate on the absolute massive TAM to start. And we're not big TAM driven investors. We'd rather have a really unique vertical that you're attacking. You have a unique insight on the pain point that you're looking to solve there, and to deeply penetrate and solve a key problem for the customer set you're looking to solve. And then we can find tangential markets that have very similar characteristics to kind of move into after that. And so I'd say those are the two differentiating elements to the way we approach investing at the early stage. And then the last thing I would say is, founders really need to sell their investors on their vision, right? And I think especially technical founders, to your point, who tend to be more introverts, who tend to be fantastic with product and development and things like that, but might be less inclined to helping bring an investor along for the journey of what they see ultimately what great looks like. And so that's what I work with a lot of founders that I mentor or provide advice to is, it's great to have an awesome market, a fantastic product, a great strategy to go operationalize that. But if you can't connect the emotional part with the investor and make them believe in you as a founder and the mission you're going after, it's going to be a tough sell for myself or for others in my seat to end up backing that company. And so that's the one point that I try and impart on founders, that yes, you have to have all the elements from a talent, experience, market, et cetera perspective, but that's not sufficient to raise money. The last element is bringing an investor along for your vision and making them believe in you personally, intimately.
And I guess that there is not enough culture of lean UX and lean startup out there to let people understand that the vision is your product and the passion is the fuel. And the technique is how you move your hands to arrive to the product as soon as possible. I guess we can do a lot of discussion about this. And maybe in the future, we can do another podcast about the lean startup and lean UX with you.
I would welcome the opportunity. I've so enjoyed this, Michele. Genuinely, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for having me on your platform and welcoming me into your community. I really look forward to spending more time together in the future. And thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you to you, Andy. The time is over, unfortunately, my dear listener. So the time is ended also for today. It's a pity. Next episode, we will deep dive again into the digital evolution because, as you know, we don't transform, we evolve. In the meantime, please keep evolving. And Andy, thank you so much for your contribution, and see you out there for forging new unicorns.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening, and please remember to subscribe to the Forge of Unicorns to stay up to date with our latest episodes.